And we're hosted here by the Washington County Republican Club in the American Legion Hall. We're very happy to be here, and we thank our corporate sponsors for tonight's event. The next question is a policy question. It is a 90-second question for each of you. Do you believe that the sequester has been useful? Do you have a plan to tackle the $19 trillion federal debt? What policy remedies would you recommend to get America back to work? And while you're thinking about that, because it is a fiscal issue, some of the members here have asked me to make sure to ask you to address what you would do about Social Security as well. So, has the sequester been useful? Do you have a plan for tackling the debt? And what policy remedies would you recommend to get America back to work? Mr. Chang.
Well, first of all, that debt have to substantially decrease annually. We have to get the national budget zero balance. We have to do that. Okay. So how to make that? I will say reform government that enable government cost less, work more efficiently. Small government cost less. We have to remove any overregulation which impedes economic growth, and then reduce tax, cut income tax, stimulate business. So American, if you cut the incorporated tax, the American business have more competitive than other countries, and then the economy will grow. And when it grow, and then if government is small, do not spend so much, then we can put that debt to reduce. Is my point.
Okay, Frank Howard.
I wish I had more than 90 seconds. Is the sequester useful? That's a good question. I would answer it in an entirely different way. I think we need to get back to regular order. My top 3 priorities in Congress would be national security, the economy and jobs, and reforming Congress. Part of reforming Congress is to get it to go back to regular order, which is not happening, which means setting a budget, getting the 12 appropriations bills to the president for signing, and getting back to doing what we should have been doing all along. That process is broken, and we need to get back to regular order. In fact, we need a new regular order that fits our current nation's needs and our economy like a hand in a glove. Tackling the $19 trillion debt, I fully concur with Speaker Ryan that over 10 years, we can actually have a balanced budget. That is called making hard decisions, getting back to regular order, and budgeting for our priorities as a country, and that means cutting out those things that need to be cut out. This government is bloated, and we need to cut some things out. And finally, how to get people back to work. I do have a plan, a tax reform plan. I don't have time to go into it, but it would unleash the economy to grow and create jobs and prosperity for all Americans. And I also advocate for the creation of a regulatory reduction commission, because in order to allow businesses to grow, they need fewer regulations, and I think it's time that we address that as well as lowering taxes.
Thank you very much, Frank Howard. Amy Hoover.
I think the key element in balance in getting the deficit down is to eliminate those federal programs that duplicate and overmatch those that should be at state level. At this point, the federal government is way too large. It's overstepping its constitutional requirements. If you go back to the Constitution, it says the federal government should provide for the common defense. It doesn't have anything else in there as a net goal for the federal government. For example, I would cut out the Common Core effort. I think that would take a lot of bloat out of the Department of Education, and we could reduce that and turn that into monies that could be better spent, or to reduce either the debt or the deficit. I think we need to review each department for those areas where they are encroaching on states' rights and states' programs, and I think that will reduce a fair amount. I am not in favor of sequestration. It is a awkward hatchet way of cutting the budget. It is disproportionately allocated to defense, and I think that reduces our safety and the safety of our families. That is not a good idea in my view. I also, by the way, am opposed to continuing resolutions. While these don't have quite the same effect as sequestration, every continuing resolution costs money. We need to get the Congress back to passing a budget in a timely manner because it costs money, it keeps programs going. When I was in the Pentagon running the Research Development and Acquisition Program for the Army, every time there was a continuing resolution, we could measure the daily cost increase.
Okay, thank you very much. David Vogt.
Sequestration was an epic failure at lack of making a decision. We talked about that already. We're 3 years into it and we still have a Congress that has still achieved nothing. The $19 trillion deficit's growing every day. The very first piece of legislation I'm going to offer is a constitutional amendment to require a balanced budget and no longer give them an out or an excuse to pass continuing resolution after resolution and never have to actually sit down and find ways to fix a broken budget and continue to build the deficit that's going to take our children and grandchildren centuries to be able to dig out of if we don't do something drastic today. How do we create jobs and get people back to work? Some of the areas that I've already been able to be a part of in Annapolis, giving opportunities to our small business growth and create jobs on their levels, gives opportunity for good, positive growth jobs. One of the biggest industries growing in Maryland today is biotechnology, and I've been an integral part with Governor Hogan in creating opportunities for those companies, creating manufacturing jobs in Washington, Allegheny, Garrett County. All of those are how we put them back to work. And Social Security isn't the issue. Trying to take away what thousands of millions of Americans have paid into for their whole life, the problem is entitlements. We've got welfare on 2-3 generations of entitlements that has grown every single day. We need to stop giving fish away and refocus on teaching them how to fish, and that will give us a future for tomorrow.
Thank you. I'm going to take just 2 seconds, Terry, before we go. The sequester, just to be clear that we all understand what it is freezing expenditures at a fixed level and taking reductions 50% from defense and 50% from social welfare programs. Terry, please.
Well, I certainly wouldn't support taking any money from our military and so forth. But anyhow, back to the debt. I'll just simply say I don't care if it's your house, my house, or the White House. If you continue to borrow more than you bring in, you're going to wind up in the poorhouse. And when you look at the federal debt, you hear 18 trillion, 19 trillion, 20 trillion. That comes out to approximately $55,000 of debt for every person in the United States. We have about 325 million people. So and then they talk about that's our portion of the debt. But that's really not true because half the people don't have the means to pay their share of the 55,000. So that means mine, working people, their cost double. So that takes it well over 100,000. And then you couple that with your state debt, your county debt, your municipality debt, or your personal debt. We're a nation of debt. It's not, are we going to crumble? It looks like it's a question of when are we going to crumble. I know here in Washington County, I've been very, very frugal, been very conservative, and I consciously, every year when our staff brings borrowing to our table, I try to at least, it doesn't always work, but we're always close, only borrow what we retire or pay back. At least I can tell the people I'm being solid, I'm being conservative, I'm watching your money, we're still trying to prosper as a community and come up with ways to generate revenue. But again, we're a nation of debt, we're in trouble, and we need some people that come from humble beginnings that understand the true value of the dollar and know how to get more out of a dollar than some multimillionaire from Montgomery County or somewhere else in the United States saying they're trying to represent average people. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Robin Ficker here. I just want to make a couple points. Number one, I'm the only lawyer up here the only real estate broker up here, the only person who lives on a farm up here, the only person who ever served at the United States Military Academy at West Point up here. Talk about sequestration. I'm going to sequester 5 liberal, big spending, tax increase specialists in Montgomery County before I even go up to the Hill. Because I've got term limits on the ballot in Montgomery County. Congressman Delaney is opposed to it, and that's going to be a great issue in my election, my race against him. So we're going to sequester those big spending liberals in Montgomery County. When I was in the legislature, and I've served 4 times as long in the legislature as anybody up here, I got the bill through to require fiscal notes to be on the floor so people would know what things cost. I submitted over 300 budget cutting amendments on the floor, and guess what? All the other Montgomery County legislators put together didn't introduce even one. And when I get down on the Hill, we're going to use a scalpel and fine-tune that budget so that we don't have a $19 trillion debt and a $500 million deficit. And Western Maryland, I'm going to be the best congressman you've ever had, except perhaps for Congressman Charles Mathias, who I interned for.
Thank you. Chris Mason, the sequester.
Yeah, on the sequester, of course, I was hit with the sequester, so I know details about it, and personally involved with it. The problem with the sequester, it affects the military more than it affects any other agencies. Why isn't that why don't we sequester more liberal agencies? Like, I like to see the EPA sequestered. I'd like to see the IRS sequestered. I'd like to see the Department of Energy sequestered. I'd like to see the Department of Stupidity sequestered. How come we don't sequester anything that's liberal? We always sequester the things that were needed. Now, sequester is a good thing. It gets rid of government. I love it. The problem is it's too political. We need to sequester and have a more balanced sequester. Yeah, the military is bloated. It's bloated like anything else. We've heard of the industrial military complex. You know, the military actually works better and more efficient when you don't give it as much. It's sort of like the Marines, right? We're more efficient when you give us less. You give us too much when you get lazy. So let's sequester the things that need to be sequestered, not just the military, but it can take sequester. Debt. We have a use or lose. I've worked in the government, DIA, NGA. The debt, right? It's a use or lose mentality. That's stupid. I like to introduce a save and gain. Well, the more you save, the more you gain from that which you save. It kind of sounds confusing, but you get rewarded for saving. You get a portion of that which you save. Instead of use or lose, which you spend all the money you can because you know you're going to lose it, and then you ask for more. How about save and gain so you're asking for less in order to be rewarded? So I like to introduce something like that. And then I'd like to cut the government in half. Easy. Encourage retirement, which the government does, and don't backfill positions. That way you don't hurt the young people, right? But allows the older people to retire, and it allows you to cut the positions that are no longer occupied, and you cut them from the very beginning and allow the young people to keep working. So that's how you can cut the government in half without affecting much of the young people that are working.
Thank you very much. Chris Mason, I think we're going to need a president, though, who can say you're fired convincingly to be able to do that. All right.
Be careful what you wish for.
Well, that's why I asked you to comment on that earlier. You had your chance. All right. Next round is a lightning round, and here's what we're going to do. They're going to be generally 30-second answers, but you're going to have to jump in, and I'm going to explain to you how this is going to work. I'm going to throw out an issue, and we're going to have a raise of hands to see where you all are. If you all agree, we're going to move to the next. All right. If there's disagreement, we'll see who is disagreeing, and we'll let you debate between the two of you. And if you need extra time, and you have time remaining, you may take that as well. So, how many of you support Common Core? Well, Republicans of Washington County, whoever wins this primary will not support Common Core. Very good. How many of you support making concealed carry permits issued by one state valid in all 50 states and the District of Columbia? How many of you support that proposition? Again, our candidates are unanimous in supporting that proposition. How many of you will vote to legalize marijuana? All right. Our candidates are, again, unanimous. How many of you will vote to repeal every word of Obamacare? How many of you will vote to overturn DACA, which is the DREAM Act, which allows children who were brought here illegally to become legalized citizens? How many would vote to overturn it? Okay. Ami Hoover, you would not vote to overturn it.
I would not vote to overturn it. I think it needs to be looked at on an individual basis. I think our entire immigration policy should be relooked as a whole. We shouldn't take it one little bit at a time and try and solve it piecemeal. That's where we get in trouble in our government, is trying to solve major problems in a piecemeal fashion. I would like to do a whole entire review of our immigration and illegal immigrant process as a whole.
So you support comprehensive immigration reform?
I support comprehensive immigration reform.
Would somebody like to take her up on that? You have 30 seconds. Robin?
We've been having comprehensive immigration reform for a long time, and look what's happened. That doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. We need to vet every person that comes into the United States, whether it be overstaying a visa, whether it be coming through our borders, because I don't want to see any Western Marylander hurt by someone who comes in illegally and then has a bomb or a gun or goes to the University of Maryland basketball game and sets off something. We need to vet people coming in this country. My parents were vetted. They came through Ellis Island.
Okay, Ami, would you like to respond? And David, would you like to
Yeah,
say something?
I will respond. My mother also came through Ellis Island. She was a legal first-generation immigrant from Italy. The issue of vetting has very little to do with immigration reform entirely. I certainly support vetting for any of the refugees that come in. I have supported Governor Hogan's position on not allowing any Syrian refugees into Maryland unless they can be vetted, and I have opposed openly on my webpage Congressman Delaney's suggestion that this can be solved with money, because it can't. It is a data problem, not a money problem. And until we can get adequate data on the refugees, we can't possibly vet them, and we can't let them in because they will keep us in fear of our lives.
It's also
David,
a
David,
wall
vote,
problem.
David, did you want to jump in for 30 seconds?
There's no such thing as comprehensive immigration reform if we haven't secured our borders first. And that also goes to, I signed a letter alongside Governor Hogan saying we are not taking the refugees because we can't vet them. Our FBI director said that, like Ms. Hober pointed out. And even more than that, I am the lead sponsor on Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act in Annapolis right now, because harboring individuals that we don't know who they are or where they came from promotes terrorism to grow in our own homes, in our own neighborhoods, and we've got to stop that.
Thank you very much. Chris Mason?
Yeah, comprehensive immigration reform never works. It hasn't worked. We had comprehension immigration before. It's called 1984. We lost California forever to the Republicans. That comprehensive immigration reform is just code for more Democrat voters that are coming into America from foreign countries. That's simply the only reason we have illegal immigrants. Ask yourself, if illegal immigrants were coming across those borders and they were primarily Republicans, what would the Democrats be doing right now? Exactly.
All right, hold on. You're going to get another chance at this because I'm going to continue on in this vein. Another raise of hands here. Just a second. Will you vote to end sanctuary cities?
Yes.
All right. Will you vote to build a wall along our southern border?
And even if Donald Trump loses, I'm going to take him up on paying for that wall.
Well, he wasn't going to pay for it. He's going to get the Mexicans to pay for it. Don't forget. All right. Will you vote to end birthright citizenship, which is anchor babies? We all know what anchor babies are? Okay. All right. Now, I want to go back to the comprehensive immigration reform because, Robin, you had your hand up and I didn't want to cut you off. Go ahead.
Well,
30 seconds.
you know, it's something I see every day going to the courts of Western Maryland, as I have been going for 30 years. Where do you think that poison, heroin, is coming from? A lot of it's coming from our southern borders. We need to be checking more carefully and have better enforcement of our borders so that the kids out here in Cumberland and Hagerstown and Frostburg and Oakland aren't poisoned by this garbage. That's what we need. We need to have a border that's not a sieve to these poisons.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got one more of these lightning round
Let me comment on that. And in addition to the border and the heroin coming into our country, we need to have consequences for the people that are bringing this stuff to our country, poisoning our youth, our people, our adults, and so forth. They're killing our citizens, and we are a land of many laws, and it seems like we have no consequences for these types of people. We need to get back to consequent laws and then serious consequences. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This question is one of several that has come up through the Washington County Republican Club. Are you familiar with the Convention of the States? Raise of hands.
Yeah.
Okay. So Ami is not familiar. Who else is not familiar? David, you were not?
No, I am.
You are. So Ami, you're not familiar. Do you support, those of you who are familiar, do you support the Convention of the States? Okay. I'm going to allow David to make a 30-second case for why you do so.
It's a right enumerated in the Constitution of the United States of America. That's enough reason to support it. It wouldn't have been put there by our founders if it was not an important one of many balances to put in our government. Our government is failing us on a federal level. The Convention of the States is a right enumerated to the sovereignty of states to be able to unify, following the constitutional requirements, and demand something to be done about it.
Yeah, the Convention of States is basically done if you get a majority of the governors, so that we have a great amount of governors that have become Republican. And one of the things they want to do is put in term limits. What Congress is never going to put in term limits. They're not going to term limit themselves. So it's going to take a Convention of States in order to do that. So that's one of the things they want to pass. So I support it to pass term limits.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. All right. In the next round, which is a 90-second response round, I'm going to ask specific questions to individual candidates.
Can I comment on term limits here? Sure,
Sure, go ahead. 30 seconds.
20 seconds.
I think, yes.
When we talk about term limits, we need to keep in mind our Congress people, they serve 2-year term limits. Our senators serve 6-year term limits. So when they do come up with something on term limits, it needs to be somewhat equal. If they're going to give the senators 2 term limits, that's 12 years. They should probably give the congressional people 6 years or 6.
That's been the general proposition as has been put forward. Okay, so now we go into the specific questions, 90-second response. Amy Huber, at the last Montgomery County debate, I watched the video of the debate, very interesting. You defended your longtime membership in the National Political Women's Caucus, a group prominently featuring Nancy Pelosi and the Stand with Planned Parenthood icon on its website. And you said that they had a strong record of defending women. You also refused to answer a question about your position on abortion, stating that it was, quote, settled law, and that you had many times taken an oath of office to uphold the law. Here's my question for you. How can you say that Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court decision that authorized abortion in 1973, is settled law when in fact it was an activist court decision and not a law passed by Congress? And I have a follow-on, but I'll let you start with that.
Okay. Do you want me to defend the National Women's Political Caucus first, or just address the abortion issue first?
Well, I would like you to perhaps answer the question of whether it's settled law, and then if you would like to comment on the National Political Women's Caucus, which is a group, as I said, is supported by Planned Parenthood and by Nancy Pelosi.
The National Women's Political Caucus and my association with it is ancient history. We're talking about the 70s, when women were not treated equally in this country, were not treated equally in the political world. The stated objective, and I'd like to read it, of the National Women's Political Caucus was to increase the number of women in all aspects of political life, as elected and appointed officials, as judges in state and federal courts, and as delegates to national conventions. The organization recognized equality for American women was not for the asking, but for the winning. That was the creed of the group when I first joined it and helped start it in 1971. No one at this table can possibly disagree with the objective of getting women more involved in the political process.
Are you still a member of that?
I am still a member. I have not been active in it since 1981. I was asked by President Reagan to go to the conventions, the national conventions and the chapter meetings, and explain to these groups why I was a Reagan supporter. I did that, and I have not been active in the group since that time.
Okay, now in these questions to the candidates, if somebody else would like to jump in with a 30-second response on the issue raised, not necessarily the individual raised, but the issue raised, please just signal your hand so I can see that. So the question of settled law, Roe v. Wade, settled
I guess
law?
the proper word of that was not settled law, but it was a Supreme Court decision based on a constitutional interpretation. I still agree with their constitutional interpretation, and I believe it was settled by the Supreme Court, and we go on from there.
Oh, okay, yes.
Well, the Constitution says that we have the right to life, and the right to life.
It does not.
It says we have a life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is exactly what it says in the preamble to the Constitution. And another thing is, nothing's settled law. Congress can always make new law. It can make new law to overturn law. The Supreme Court is only supposed to interpret that law. So settled law comes through Congress, and that law can be overturned, and it can be reestablished, overturned, and it can be reestablished. So there really is no such thing as settled law, because Congress can make the law, and they can tweak it any way they want.
Let me just follow up on this, because I do think it's an important issue. If elected to Congress, would you support the Franks Blackburn Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act to ban very late-term abortions, such as those carried out by convicted criminal Kermit Gosnell and by Dr. Leroy Carhart down in Germantown, that's still right here in the 6th District? Would you support that law?
I would support that law.
Okay. Anybody would oppose that? No. A comment, Frank?
No, I was going to say, I'm with her.
Okay, you would support that as well. Okay.
Can I comment on settled law?
Go ahead.
Just a quick comment on that. Slavery was once settled law.
Yes.
Women's right to vote was once settled law. Settled law is an inexplicable lack of backbone. Congress is put there to make decisions and overturn some decisions sometimes. Those were things that we fought against at various points in our history, and that's things that we will continue to face, that we must continue to fight.
30 seconds.
And if Congress chooses to overturn it, I will abide by the then settled law.
Okay, fine. Terry Baker, at the last Montgomery County debate, you said you believe that Congress should declare war on ISIS. Why do you think Congress should declare war instead of giving the president an authorization for the use of military force?
Well, I think all you need to do is look around, read the news. They're cutting off people's heads. They have no regard for life. They hate the United States of America. They hate everything about us. It seems like they can do anything they want, and we're not doing anything in return. It's time that we, as he said, get a backbone, stand up, fight, take the war to them, stop letting them bring the war to us.
And anyone want to comment on the difference between authorization for use of force and declaration of war?
Yeah, it's constitutional. You have to get the approval of Congress in order to even go to war in the first place. And we ought to go to war with ISIS because they pose an existential threat. I firmly believe in not getting involved in most of the issues around the world. If they play in the sandbox, and they stay playing in that sandbox, and they want to kill each other, go around in the head. When you come over here, we've got to hammer them, we've got to hammer them hard.
Okay, thank you. David Vogt, you have a bill before the Maryland General Assembly that would regulate mosques. Isn't that an infringement on First Amendment rights? And regardless of your answer to that, why do you feel it's necessary?
Let me be clear. My bill in front of the General Assembly will regulate any form of supporting terrorism. Unfortunately, the only place we've seen evidence of that here in Maryland was in a Baltimore mosque, which the president so thought it was a great idea to go and promote that very mosque. So my bill will stop giving tax breaks to any organization that provides any form of either direct or indirect support of terrorism. Now, if that is something that our Constitution protects, there's several thousand forefathers and founders of this country that are rolling over right now. The First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States protects freedom of speech, freedom of religion. It does not protect any freedom to act of terror or a tax-exempt status.
And David, I'll ask you a follow-up. If you were elected to Congress, would you seek to have, to promote that kind of legislation on a federal level?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. All right. Robin Ficker.
Yes, sir.
Everyone has seen your big signs, widen I-270. I drive up and down I-270. You've got one in the place where I had my congressional signs and the gubernatorial signs. It's great. You've got great locations. Most of us who live here agree with this and beyond, but as a member of Congress, how are you going to do it? Because it's not up to members of Congress to widen roads. So how are you going to widen I-270, Robin? What's the plan?
Well, first let me say that I've already met with Maryland Transportation Secretary Pete Ron, Larry Hogan's road guy, about this. He agrees that it's a good idea. The people at the public hearing where I attended with him agree that it's a good idea. We need someone who's going to be down on the Hill, who's fighting for Western Maryland, who hears about the need for road improvements in Western Maryland. And when I get down there, they're going to hear those words, Western Maryland. They're going to hear the words I-81. They're going to hear the words I-270. I'm going to stand up for my constituents. There is federal road money. I-270 is a federal road. So is I-81. We can get federal funds for these federal roads and state funds, matching funds. It just takes a will. It takes someone with focus. Ficker's got focus. Ficker's going to get I-81 widened. Ficker's going to get 2 new reversible lanes on I-270. Write it down, and in 2 years from today, check out and see if we haven't made a lot of progress. Larry Hogan's going to look down on the Hill and he's going to say, is that me down on Capitol Hill improving all that infrastructure in Western Maryland?
Who's responsible for the bridge?
Okay. Anybody want to comment on that? If not, I've got a question.
No, I will make not a comment to him specifically, but I know today I received some information on what we call the Tiger funding, and that was one of the shovel-ready programs that Obama put in place, I believe, back around 2000.